Before we begin, I want you to do something unusual. Don't move. Don't reach for your phone. Don't adjust the volume or check the time. Just sit with this question for a moment. Who were you before the world told you who to be? Before the criticism landed and stayed? Before the failures accumulated into a story you started to believe? Before the voices of parents, teachers, peers, algorithms, all of them competing for space in your mind? Before all of that, there was a version of you that was simply present. Curious, open, unguarded. That version of you is not gone. It has been buried. Slowly, systematically, under years of conditioning, under the weight of comparison and fear, and the relentless pressure to be more, do more, prove more. And the question I want to explore with you today is not how to become someone new. It is how to unbecome everything that was never really you in the first place. The Stoics had a word for the innermost self, the rational, sovereign core of a human being, the hegemonikon, the ruling faculty, and they believed with a certainty that centuries of philosophy have not managed to shake, that this faculty, properly cultivated, is indestructible. Today we are going to talk about how to cultivate it, not through grand gestures, not through dramatic life overhauls, but through 5 words, spoken each morning, lived each day. Stay with me. Every section of this matters, and by the end, you will understand why. There is a ritual that most people perform every morning without realizing it, and it is quietly destroying them. They wake up, and before they are even fully conscious, before the mind has had a single moment to orient itself, they reach for their phone. Within seconds, the morning has been colonized by notifications, by news, by someone else's highlight reel, by the ambient anxiety of a world that has decided urgency is the default state. The mind, which was blank and open just moments before, is now flooded. And here is what that flood does. It sets the emotional tone for the entire day. Neuroscience has a principle, emotional priming, which tells us that the emotional state we occupy in the first moments of consciousness tends to persist. Not because we are weak, but because the brain, in its extraordinary efficiency, uses early morning data as a template for how to interpret everything that follows. You wake up scrolling through anxiety-inducing headlines. Your brain will look for threats all day. You wake up to comparison culture. Your brain will measure everything you do against a standard you didn't choose. You wake up reactive. You will spend the day reacting. This is not philosophy. This is neurobiology. Marcus Aurelius understood it 2,000 years before the science. He wrote in the opening of Book 2 of Meditations, his private journal, never intended for any reader. Begin the morning by saying to thyself, I shall meet with the busybody, the ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, unsocial. But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil. He was priming himself, deliberately. Before the day could prime him, the words you speak to yourself in the morning are not decoration. They are not a wellness trend. They are the first instructions your brain receives about how to interpret reality. They are the lens through which every subsequent experience of the day will be filtered. And most of us have been handing that lens to other people. Today, that changes. I'm going to give you 5 words, 5 single words, each of which carries within it an entire philosophy of how to live. We are going to go deep on each one. We are going to trace them through history, through science, through the lived experience of people who faced genuine darkness and came through it with their minds intact. These are not affirmations in the conventional sense. You cannot say them half-heartedly while staring at the ceiling and expect anything to change. They require presence. They require the willingness to mean what you say. But if you bring that willingness, if you speak these words each morning with the understanding that you are giving instructions to the most sophisticated and responsive instrument you will ever have access to, your own mind, something will begin to shift. Slowly, genuinely, permanently. Surge of frustration or fear. That impulse is automatic. It is the result of years of conditioning. It is your nervous system doing what it was trained to do, assess threats and respond immediately. But when you began your morning with "I choose my response," something is different. Not the emotion. The emotion arrives anyway. That is human and it is fine. But beneath the emotion, there is a pause, a recognition. This is a moment where I choose. You feel the frustration. You don't act from it. You feel the fear. You don't construct your entire day around it. You take a breath, not as a cliché, but as a genuine neurological intervention, because controlled breathing actually down-regulates the stress response. And you ask, what response here serves me? What response serves the situation? That question is everything. It is the difference between a life that is happening to you and a life that you are authoring. Let's talk about what this looks like over time. Because one morning of "I choose my response" is a seed. It is necessary, but not sufficient. The rewiring happens through repetition. Your brain has spent years, possibly decades, building automatic pathways. Neuroscientists call these default mode networks. The well-worn roads your mind travels without asking for directions. For most people, those roads run straight from triggering event to reactive behavior. Someone criticizes you. Road runs directly to defensiveness. A plan falls apart. Road runs directly to catastrophizing. You fail at something. Road runs directly to shame. You cannot demolish those roads overnight. They were built through thousands of repetitions. But here is the extraordinary truth about neuroplasticity. You can build new roads alongside them. Every time you pause at the crossroads of stimulus and response and consciously choose, every single time, you are laying down a new neural pathway. You are reinforcing an alternative route. Over weeks and months, that alternative route becomes more familiar. The automatic road starts to feel less automatic. The pause becomes natural. The choice becomes your default. This is not metaphor. This is literally how your brain reorganizes itself in response to repeated experience. Marcus Aurelius, governing an empire of 60 million people, dealing with plagues that killed thousands, betrayals from people he trusted, children who died before him. He came back to this every single day, not because he had mastered it, but because mastery required returning to it daily. He wrote to himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Not once, not on particularly difficult days. Every morning, every day, I choose my response." Feel the weight of that. 4 words that, spoken daily with intention, are a complete philosophy of personal sovereignty. Growth lives here. I want to tell you something about discomfort that no one tells you when you begin the work of becoming. It gets uncomfortable before it gets better. Not as a warning, as a confirmation, as a signal that you are, in fact, on the right path. The brain is a prediction machine. Its entire operating system is built around the principle of energy conservation, which means it strongly prefers the familiar over the novel, the known over the unknown, the comfortable over the challenging. Not because it is lazy, Because in evolutionary terms, the familiar was safe and the unfamiliar was potentially lethal. But you are not living in a savanna environment where novelty means predators. You are living in a world where growth requires exactly what the brain is wired to resist: the willingness to be uncomfortable, incompetent, and uncertain on the way to becoming capable. Every time you feel that resistance, that anxious pull back toward what you already know, you're experiencing your brain doing its job. And your job, if you want to grow, is to gently, consistently override it. This is what growth lives here does. It reframes the signal. Instead of, "This discomfort means something has gone wrong," the message becomes, "This discomfort is evidence that something is happening." Not just any something, the specific something called growth. Seneca spent his most intellectually productive years in exile on the island of Corsica. He had been one of the most powerful men in Rome. Advisor to emperors, celebrated orator, wealthy beyond most people's imagination. And then, through a combination of political intrigue and imperial paranoia, he was stripped of everything and banished. He could have spent those years in bitterness and grief. He had every cultural permission to do so. By Roman standards, what had been done to him was a profound injustice. His status, his social identity, his life's work, all of it dissolved by a decree. Instead, he wrote some of the most profound philosophical letters in Western history. He wrote to his friend Lucilius, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." And elsewhere, "Be harsh with yourself at times, for soft natures are not always reliable." This was not performative Stoicism. This was a man who was genuinely living what he was writing about, who was finding in the worst circumstances of his life the material for his greatest work, who understood that the question was not, "Why is this happening to me?" but "What will I do with what is happening to me?" Amor fati, the love of fate. Friedrich Nietzsche would articulate this concept explicitly 18 centuries later, but Seneca was already living it. Not the passive acceptance of everything that comes, not a numb resignation that pretends suffering doesn't hurt, but an active, deliberate embrace of reality, including its hardest parts, as the necessary material of becoming. Here is a question worth sitting with. What have you been avoiding because it makes you feel incompetent? There is likely something. For most people, there are several somethings. A skill they have been meaning to develop. A conversation they have been postponing. A creative endeavor they have been holding and waiting until they feel ready. A relationship dynamic they have been managing around instead of moving through. The avoidance is always rational on the surface. I'll start when I have more time, when the moment is right, when I feel more prepared. But underneath the rationalization is almost always this: I don't want to be bad at this. I don't want to feel incompetent. I don't want to face the gap between who I am now and who I need to be to do this thing. That gap is not a reason to wait. That gap is the entire point. Every skill you now have, every capacity, every competence, was once a gap. There was a time when you couldn't read, when you couldn't drive, when you couldn't navigate the work that you now do with relative fluency. You crossed those gaps through exactly one mechanism: sustained exposure to the discomfort of not yet knowing. When you say growth lives here each morning, you're doing something precise. You are preloading a response to the discomfort before it arrives. You're telling your brain, when I encounter the feeling of challenge today, that is not a warning signal. That is a green light. That is the work. Epictetus was asked once how to make progress in philosophy, by which he meant how to make progress in life. His answer was characteristically direct. We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. But he went further than that. He said that growth requires not just the right response to hard circumstances, but the willingness to actively seek the kind of challenges that reveal your weakness. Because weakness you don't know about cannot be addressed. Weakness brought into the open, through honest effort in difficult situations, becomes the exact location where your next level of strength is forged. This is why the most genuinely developed people you know are not the ones who had easy lives. They are the ones who refuse to be made smaller by hard ones. There is a psychological concept called post-traumatic growth, the documented phenomenon of people emerging from genuinely traumatic experiences with increased psychological strength, deeper relationships, a greater sense of personal possibility, and a more profound appreciation for life. Not despite the trauma, through the engagement with it. This does not mean trauma is good. It means that what we do with difficulty is a choice, and that choice has consequences that extend far beyond the original difficulty. You are not here to have a comfortable life. Comfort is fine as a rest state, but it is not the environment where the self deepens, where character develops, where the kind of inner strength that actually sustains you through the hardest moments gets built. You are here to become someone, and becoming requires becoming in the heat of something. Growth lives here, in this discomfort, in this challenge, in this exact moment where part of you wants to retreat. Here is where the work is. Here is where you are. Today matters most. The human mind has a unique and extraordinary capacity that no other creature we know of possesses. The ability to mentally time travel. We can visit the past in perfect sensory detail. Smell the room, hear the voice, feel the specific texture of a moment that happened years ago. We can project ourselves into futures that haven't arrived yet. Rehearsing conversations, imagining outcomes, constructing elaborate scenarios of what might go wrong. This capacity is extraordinary. It is why we can plan, learn from history, develop empathy, write literature, build cathedrals that will take 100 years to complete. It is also, unmanaged, the primary engine of human suffering. Because when the time-traveling mind gets stuck, when it loops back compulsively to the past or projects anxiously into the future, it is never actually here. And here is the only place where your life is actually happening. There is a concept in Buddhist philosophy that overlaps significantly with Stoic thought, and I find the overlap worth examining. The Buddhist concept of dukkha, often translated as suffering but more accurately rendered as unsatisfactoriness, is rooted not primarily in external circumstances, but in the mind's habitual resistance to what is, its preference for what was or what might be over what is actually happening right now. Marcus Aurelius, who had never read a word of Buddhist philosophy, arrived at the same understanding from a completely different direction. He wrote, "Confine yourself to the present, not as a dismissal of past wisdom or future planning, but as a recognition that the present is the only jurisdiction in which you have any actual power." He was emperor. He had more external power than almost any human being in history. And still he understood that genuine power, the power that actually matters, the power over the quality of your own experience, existed only in the present moment. Think about what it costs you to live outside of now. When you replay a conversation from last month, running through what you said, what they said, what you should have said, your brain does not fully distinguish between the memory and the present reality. The stress response activates. The cortisol rises. The body tightens around a wound that is, in external reality, no longer happening. You are paying a real physiological price for a ghost. When you rehearse a difficult conversation that might happen next week, running through every possible way it could go wrong, preparing for arguments that may never occur, your nervous system responds as if the threat is present. Because from the brain's perspective, a vividly imagined threat activates many of the same neural circuits as an actual one. You're paying a real physiological price for a possibility that hasn't arrived and may never arrive. Multiplied over days, weeks, years, the cumulative cost of living anywhere but now is extraordinary. Not just in terms of anxiety and stress, in terms of presence, in terms of the relationships you are only half in because your mind is somewhere else, in terms of the work you do at half capacity because your attention is split between the task and the mental weather system of past and future. Seneca, in one of his most remarkable letters, wrote something that I think is among the most important sentences in the history of philosophy. Begin at once to live and count each separate day as a separate life. Each day a separate life, complete in itself. Not a step toward something, not a consequence of something, a life. This was not a man with easy circumstances writing from a position of comfort. Seneca lived under Nero, one of history's most unstable and violent emperors, who had once been his student and who would eventually order his death. He wrote this in the knowledge that any given day could be his last, not as a romantic metaphor, as a literal possibility. And from within that reality, his counsel was not to be afraid. It was to be present, to treat each day as the totality of a life, with the same intentionality, the same fullness, the same refusal to defer living to some more convenient future. When you say today matters most, you are making a claim that is more radical than it sounds. You are saying, I will not spend this day as a waiting room for the life I actually want to live. I will not treat today as preparation for tomorrow. I will not hold my real engagement, my real presence, my real investment in escrow until the conditions are more favorable. This day, this specific, unrepeatable, never-to-return collection of hours is your life, not a rehearsal for it, not a lesser version of it that will improve once you've achieved X or resolved Y or become Z. This, the conversation happening right now, the work in front of you right now, the person across from you right now, the sky outside the window right now, this is it. There is practical power in this, beyond the philosophical. When you stop splitting your attention between past and future and bring it fully to bear on the present moment, you become dramatically more effective. Not because you are trying harder, but because you are concentrating rather than diffusing. The Latin root of the word attention is attendere, to stretch toward. When your attention is fully present, you stretch toward reality as it actually is. You see what is actually in front of you. You respond to actual conditions rather than imagined ones. Marcus Aurelius could govern an empire because he was extraordinarily present. He dealt with each problem as it arrived. not as a component of some vast anxiety about all the problems that might arrive. His journals show a mind that was perpetually returning from distraction, from worry, from abstraction, back to the immediate, back to what is the work of this moment. This is the practice, not achieving perfect presence, returning to it, again and again and again. Today matters most. Say it when you wake up. Say it when your mind begins its time travel. Use it as a rope that pulls you back to the only shore where you can actually stand. I am enough. I want to be very precise about what this word means and what it does not mean, because it is the most vulnerable of the five, and it is the most likely to be misunderstood in both directions, either as an excuse for complacency or as a reassurance so hollow it slides off the mind without touching anything real. I am enough is not a participation trophy. It is not a statement that you have nothing left to learn, no room to grow, no character defects worth examining. It is not permission to coast. It is not a denial of the very real work that genuine development requires. What it is, and this is precise, is a declaration that your worth is not the variable in the equation of your life. There is a distinction that Epictetus drew repeatedly, and that I think is one of the most important distinctions in all of Stoic thought. It is the distinction between preferred and difference. Things like wealth, reputation, health, status, success, which are fine to pursue and reasonable to prefer, but which are external to your essential self. And the things that constitute your actual nature, your capacity for reason, your capacity for virtue, your capacity for conscious, deliberate choice. The first category, the externals, fluctuates constantly. They arrive and depart. They can be taken, lost, destroyed by circumstance. They are subject to forces beyond your control. The second category, your rational, choosing, virtue-capable nature, Epictetus taught, arrives complete. It is not diminished by failure. It is not enhanced by success. It is not dependent on the approval of others. It does not need to be earned. When you conflate these two categories, when you decide that your worth as a person is directly tied to your performance, your status, your productivity, other people's perception of you, you have created a problem that can never be solved. Because the externals will always fluctuate, you will always sometimes fail. You will always sometimes be misunderstood or rejected or fall short of your own standards. And if your worth rises and falls with those externals, you will spend your entire life on an emotional roller coaster that exhausts you, empties you, and ultimately leaves you more afraid of failure than capable of genuine growth. Let's talk about where this lie comes from. Because for most people, the belief I am not enough is not a choice. It is a conclusion drawn from early experience. A child who was only praised conditionally, praised for achievement, criticized for failure, loved in a way that felt contingent on performance, learns a lesson that their developing brain accepts as fact. My value depends on what I produce. This is not a philosophical position. It is not even a conscious thought at the time. It is a survival adaptation, a lesson learned from the most powerful people in the child's world about how to be safe. That lesson follows people into adulthood with remarkable fidelity. The high achiever who can never rest because stopping feels like disappearing. The people pleaser who cannot say no because disapproval feels existentially threatening. The perfectionist who would rather not try than try and fail because failure carries the unbearable freight of unworthiness. These are not character flaws. They are logical extensions of a foundational belief that was installed before the person was old enough to evaluate it. I am enough is not a bypass of that work. It is the foundation that makes the work possible. Marcus Aurelius returned to this theme in Meditations more than almost any other. Despite being, by all external measures, the most important person in the world at that time, he wrote repeatedly about the transience of fame, status, achievement, about how quickly the greatest accomplishments are forgotten, about how the same earth receives both emperors and beggars. He was not being morbid. He was doing what great philosophers do, using the contemplation of impermanence to clarify what actually matters. And what he kept arriving at was this: the quality of your inner life, the integrity of your choices, the alignment between your values and your actions, not the results, not the outcomes, not the reputation you leave behind. He wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. Within, not without, not contingent on what the world gives or withholds. Here is what changes when you genuinely begin to believe I am enough. Not when you say it, but when something in you begins to actually inhabit it. You stop performing. There is a particular exhaustion that cometh from living life as a performance for an audience whose approval you are always seeking. When you genuinely know your worth is not contingent on their approval, the performance ends. What replaces it is presence, actual engagement, work done because it matters to you rather than because it might impress someone. You stop shrinking. The person who secretly believes they are not enough spends enormous energy making themselves smaller so as not to draw attention to the gap between who they appear to be and who they fear they actually are. When the gap closes, not because you've become perfect, but because you've stopped measuring yourself against an external standard, you take up space. You speak, you create, you risk. Not because you're not afraid, but because your worth is no longer on the line. You pursue excellence without being enslaved by it. There is a profound difference between the person who pursues excellence from a foundation of wholeness and the person who pursues it in desperate search of it. The first is liberated. The second is trapped. The first can fail without being destroyed. The second cannot afford to fail because failure confirms the worst thing they believe about themselves. I am enough does not make you complacent. It makes you free. And freedom, paradoxically, is the best possible condition for genuine growth. This moment is mine. We have arrived at the fifth word, and I want to tell you why it is last. Everything that came before, the choice of response, the embrace of growth, the presence in today, the knowledge of sufficiency. All of it is philosophy until it meets the present moment. All of it is theory until it encounters actual reality, until it is applied. This moment is mine is not a word of comfort. It is a word of activation. Epictetus opened his Enchiridion, his handbook of philosophy, with what he considered the foundational principle of all practice. Not wisdom, not virtue, not even happiness, but a single actionable distinction. Some things are in our control and others not. He spent his entire philosophical life teaching people to apply that distinction in real time. Not in the abstract, not in the calm of contemplation, but in the moment when the news arrives, when the person disappoints you, when the plan collapses, when the fear rises, when the old patterns begin their pull, because that is when it counts. Not in theory, in the actual breathing, uncontrollable reality of now. There is a tendency, particularly among people who are drawn to philosophy, to self-development, to the kind of content you are watching right now, to become very sophisticated consumers of ideas and very inconsistent practitioners of them, to understand deeply what Viktor Frankl meant about choosing your response, to nod in recognition at Seneca's counsel about finding growth in difficulty, to feel genuinely moved by Marcus Aurelius's insistence on the present moment, and then to close the video and return almost immediately to the same patterns. This is not hypocrisy, it is the nature of change. Understanding precedes behavior, but understanding alone does not create it. The bridge between understanding and living is practice, and practice only exists in the present moment. When you wake up tomorrow morning, before the phone, before the noise, before the demands of the day take their first bite out of your attention, there is a window. It is brief, maybe 30 seconds, maybe 2 minutes, but it is yours, completely. In that window, the mind is unusually receptive. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational thought, deliberate intention, and executive function, is coming online. The amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, the source of reactive emotion, is still relatively quiet. The mind is, for a few moments, genuinely open. This is when you speak. Not casually, not while checking your phone, but with the same intention that Marcus Aurelius brought to his morning meditations. That same deliberate preparation of the mind for what the day will require. I choose my response. Growth lives here. Today matters most. I am enough. This moment is mine. You do not need to say all 5 every morning. 1 is enough. Rotate them. Or find the one that speaks most directly to where you are right now. The one that addresses the lie you most need to confront. But say it. Mean it. Let it land. Seneca wrote in one of his final letters before Nero ordered his death, "I shall act as if I were in the sight of all, and I shall always do so, even if alone." He was describing what philosophers call integrity, the alignment between inner belief and outer action, whether or not anyone is watching. And he was pointing at something essential. The practice is not for performance. It is not for the morning journal entry you will one day show someone. It is not for the podcast you will record, or the content you will create, or the impression you will make. It is for the interior, for the ruling faculty, for the hegemonicon that receives every experience and decides what it means and what to do next. The work is in private, in the 30 seconds before you reach for your phone, in the pause before you react to the message that makes you angry, in the breath before you speak in a moment that matters, in the quiet recognition 100 times a day of this moment is mine and I choose what I do with it. Here is what I want you to understand about time. You will not feel the rewiring happening. Neuroplasticity is not a dramatic event. It is not an awakening. It is not a transformation you will be able to point to and say, "There, that was the day I changed." It is subtle, cumulative, a gradual thickening of new pathways, a gradual thinning of old ones, a slow reorientation of default patterns that you will only notice in retrospect, when you realize that you handled something differently than you would have 6 months ago, when you catch yourself in the pause and choose instead of react, when the self-critical voice speaks and, for the first time, you notice it without believing it. The work is quiet. The work is daily. The work is now. This moment his mind. The Stoics were not people who had solved the problem of being human. They were people who had committed, as a daily, lifelong practice, to facing it honestly. Marcus Aurelius did not achieve perfect equanimity. He was a man who grieved and worried and struggled and failed. What set him apart was that he kept returning to the work, to the words, to the practice. Every morning, every day. For 20 years on the throne of an empire, he wrote in a private journal that no one was meant to read, reminding himself of the same truths over and over. Not because he had forgotten them, but because remembering requires practice. And practice requires returning. You will forget. You will have weeks where the phone wins in the first 30 seconds and the day is over before it began. Where the old patterns run without resistance. Where the words feel hollow and the philosophy feels impossibly distant from the reality you are living in. Come back. Not with self-criticism. Not with the added weight of having failed at self-improvement, which is its own particular cruelty. Simply come back, the way a breath comes back after being held, naturally. Without drama. 5 words, spoken each morning, lived each day as imperfectly and honestly as you can manage. I choose my response. Growth lives here. Today matters most. I am enough.